It's a great pleasure to welcome IOCO to the MyBroadband 2021 Cloud Conference, and Richard Vestav joins us. He's the cluster executive at IOCO. It's great to see you, Richard. Firstly, welcome to you. How's 2021 been treating you so far?
Nice to see you as well, Aki. It's so far so good. It's been great. Relocated to a new part of the world, and yeah, can't complain. Thanks very much.
Where are you? Where have you relocated to?
So I'm actually based in the UK now.
Okay.
So looking at the broader portfolio with obviously cloud being at the center, but also looking at the UK and European operations for IOCO internationally.
Well, I guess that dovetails perfectly into our discussion, because this is about the cloud, and without the cloud, you would not have been able to relocate the way you have and continue the business that you have. And really, the reality is today is that the cloud has enabled us to work from wherever we want. But of course, there are pitfalls, and I think that the journey hasn't been perfect for many people. So, what are the pitfalls that you've seen moving to the cloud, Richard?
I think given the situation around COVID and a lot of organizations looking to move, I suppose, accelerating their digital transformations and moving applications into cloud platforms so that remote work was becoming a lot easier. I think probably the biggest pitfall that we found was the lack of maybe inherent skills that allowed organizations to leverage some of the great features and services that are presented from some of the hyperscale providers in the market.
Yeah, so there's a massive skills shortage, you're saying, which is quite interesting, and there's something that's existed for a while, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they obviously, from a technology perspective, we're seeing a lot of staff moving and relocating overseas. Just a general trend that we're seeing happening in the market today. But obviously, as you say, for a lot of staff being remote, still gives them the ability to work in their companies in South Africa, for argument's sake.
Yes.
However, that said, with the rapid move in terms of enhancements like AWS brings out on an annual basis, or Google, as an example, even local providers in the market, to stay abreast a lot of this, to stay abreast of the technology changes and enhancements, does always require a lot of upskilling and enhancing yourself and your own capabilities, inside an organization.
It's so interesting listening to you talking about that, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward. But right now, I mean, this massive digitization that's been taking place, I mean, the journey to the cloud was already there, but I think it's really been accelerated with COVID-19. When you look at where we are right now, and you have existing infrastructures, how will the cloud, for example, support existing infrastructure within organizations?
So I still think that there's going to be a large consumption of infrastructure for enterprise organizations. They still have their own data centers, a lot of them. We're seeing a massive investment by some of the larger telcos in the South African market to build new infrastructure and new data centers. So there definitely still is a requirement and need for organizations to buy and maybe own their own infrastructure. But I think with the landing of the hyperscalers in the local market and setting up their regions, I think we're getting the best of both worlds. So organizations can start leveraging some of the newer future type tech in terms of cloud, as well as still sweat the assets that they've invested while getting the best of both worlds.
Okay, and Richard, the big thing has been security and data. And obviously everyone is very conscious of their data, keeping their data safe. We've heard of a few breaches that have taken place. How do you keep your data safe in the cloud is the question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think if we go back to the old days, there was a big focus just on perimeter security. So if we had the firewalls and we were able to stop intruders from coming through the front door, then people felt that that was adequate. But as you see now, that there's a massive amount of data lost through internal staff taking data, as well as because of the introduction of remote work. But for a lot of staff, we're needing to look at how do we implement more secure network capabilities in order to allow for the remote workers. So we you're seeing an uptake of SASE and zero trust networking, which is quite a big thing, as well as things like SD-WAN, which is also, companies like, or organizations like Citrix and Fortinet are investing heavily in a big focus in terms of end user compute, and then connecting back into into the corporate network. Not to mention that with the shift of your applications into the hyperscale, like AWS as an example, you're going to start potentially using things like virtual desktops. So that's also quite a big opportunity for organizations to leverage that capability, which brings them a bit closer to the actual application itself.
Now, storing the storage of data is really, everyone is storing everything in the cloud today. I'm doing that as well. And I do find that, and I guess we've got a lot more data to save into the cloud than we had before. When you look at the cost associated with that, is storing data in the cloud expensive right now?
It is still quite expensive, and I suppose that's just because of exactly what you're saying. The exponential growth of data by user, by organization is really it's just scaling. But I think one needs to, again, and it comes down to understanding the capabilities that the hyperscale providers bring, as an example, which is really looking to see how you archive that data, how you push the data into different buckets per se. So when you readily require the access of certain parts of the data, you can get to it quickly. That's going to be a bit more expensive, but then you can go and start doing things like archiving of data that you're not accessing. And this is auto archiving. So if you can see that you're not accessing that data, push it off onto a slightly cheaper storage. And then you go into something, even a little bit further, where you're going into kind of deep archive, where that data would, you typically wouldn't access that data at all within, let's say, a year or 2 year period. But there might be a regulatory requirement for you to store that data, so you can keep that and then age it out as you require. So as expensive as data is, you want to be able to keep that. The other thing around the data side is, organizations are starting to invest quite heavily in analytics, being able to use the data that they have. And, there's probably a lot of money sitting in their data. So how do they extract that, the wealth out of their data and use it more effectively, whether it be to analyze where their businesses come from, or looking at trends and growth into the future. So, data analytics is quite an important thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can attribute to a massive cost saving when you start being smart about how you store your data with the right analytics and the right algorithms, and really prioritizing the data that you talk about. I know we started the conversation about the skills, and I can't stop thinking about that skill set that's required in this country. I mean, and globally even. I guess that the growth of the cloud has resulted in a massive skill set shortage. Do we have that right skill set to adopt to the cloud?
I think we do. I think, in the past, if you look at the more the infrastructure layer, where virtualization was becoming a lot more relevant in years in the past. The skill sets around the platform infrastructure virtualization is very, very good in South Africa. I think there is there's been a big investment in some of the more digital elements. So if you look at things like the big data space, the application development space, maybe test automation, these are areas that organizations are investing to skill their resources in. However, as much as you skill in your resources, there's a demand, from the rest of the world looking for skilled resources and how they can pull them out. Right. I think what we do have, which is a great opportunity for the South African market, is looking how we can use our resources and export that capability into other markets. And we do that today. We have operations in the UK and Switzerland, and in other parts of Europe, and we use that skill set in order to bring them into some of the international markets, which it really is. It makes us, I suppose, cost effective and competitive when we're going and talking to those markets. So it's finding a balance between skilling your resources and then obviously giving them the opportunity to develop themselves and obviously maintain that the growth in your organization.
And I guess organizations such as yourselves at IOCO, you've got the skills and you've got the expertise dealing with customers to truly understand the environment and provide the best solutions, whatever you're doing with your data and however you're managing your cloud services. So you guys have got that real deep heritage of experience to do these kind of things. Quite a contentious question, and you know, is there an answer to this? You know, everybody talks about their cloud service provider and, you know, I've got the best cloud service provider. They do this, they do that. Which is the best cloud service provider? How do you even define such a thing?
So if I talk around the hyperscalers specifically, I mean, the Microsoft Azure platform was the first one to arrive in the South African region. You know, AWS set up their region thereafter. Google hasn't set up a region in South Africa as yet. But if you look at those three hyperscalers, they all bring something quite unique. Some maybe more than others. But if you look at, you know, data and analytics, Google's got a very strong play in the market around that. Not to say that, you know, AWS wouldn't be like that, but, you know, I would probably look to see in the database space, you know, what opportunities could I use in AWS that aren't necessarily SQL related database elements which fit very well into the, you know, the Azure space. So I think each hyperscaler brings their own flavor to the market. I don't think there's one specific hyperscaler that's, you know, just so much better than anyone else. Obviously, if you look at the stats globally, you know, AWS is the giant in the market, and yes, they do bring some really unique elements that support organizations. So, you know, I think they're doing good work in terms of where they are at, but they all bring some I suppose a good flavor to the market.
Yeah, I guess it's like asking somebody, you know, what's your favorite flower? You know, there's so many beautiful flowers out there, and each of the flowers have their own kind of attributes and their own unique beauty and you know, things that make you feel good about it. And I guess, as you mentioned, you know, every cloud provider has their strengths and unique offerings. When you look at the main benefits, and you spoke about hyperscale a second ago, when you look at those unique benefits around hyperscale for organizations in their strategy, I mean, what would you advise around that?
I think organizations need to not be too scared to look to see how they can adopt certain, you know, certain applications, or at least just test the water with the hyperscaler. I think, you know, the one really nice thing is organizations like VMware, as an example, have done a lot of work in investing in their virtualization layer, which most organizations know because it's a consolidation technology. But what they've done is they've looked to see how they can actually run that inside an AWS platform, as an example, and make it easy for customers to migrate certain workloads between the platforms. So right. I think you don't need to jump in and consume or throw everything into the hyperscaler. I think what you can do is you can use that ability of being able to switch workloads on, test certain applications, try different services, and switch them off, and then not get charged for it. So you have that flexibility which that brings, and I think organizations need to look at that. While on the other side, ensuring that, you know, they've got the right skills or partner with the right you know, service providers like an IOCO, as an example, to help them ensure that the pillars of designing their hyperscale platform are correct.
Okay. Richard, it's been a tremendous journey over the last 18 months or so, with COVID-19 really forcing organizations to accelerate their journey to the cloud. I mean, the journey had already started for most people, but I think that we've had to do things differently in the cloud, as we've touched on some of the things in our conversation. But when you look back at COVID-19 and the impact that it's had in the cloud business for customers, for people like yourselves, is there anything that stands out that you've learned from this massive shift that has taken place? Something that has surprised you, perhaps, that COVID-19 has brought for people accelerating their move to the cloud?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, okay, probably the biggest thing was seeing how organizations weren't leveraging some of the amazing benefits that cloud brings to them, like the ability to, you know, switch off certain less mission critical applications when they're not being used, maybe not just back up the entire environment and look to replicate and create disaster recovery around specific elements that are critical to their business. And what we did was we spent a lot of time actually when COVID hit, and we looked at all of the customers that we provide services for, and we looked to see where they could be doing more optimization in their services. And we started uncovering there were certain areas that they could definitely optimize and create savings for their organization. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I personally have learned through cloud adoption and COVID-19. And believe me, there was a massive adoption, an increase in consumption as a result of COVID. It was just, how do we do it effectively? That's all.
Yeah, and I guess, Richard, are we going to see that this pace of adoption continue? And I guess many organizations had to fast track a lot of their projects at the start of the pandemic, and we're now moving at quite a pace. Is this pace going to continue indefinitely? How much longer can this pace continue at this rate with the adoption to the cloud?
I stand to be corrected, but I think in the hyperscale space globally, there's like 19 to 20%, I think, of a certain size of organizations that have actually adopted, services from AWS as an example. Again, I'm not saying that hyperscale is the only world. There's many other capabilities like, offering traditional hosted cloud platforms and those types of things. In terms of adoption, I think it's going to carry on like this. We are seeing a lot of organizations, not in the traditional infrastructure space, but talking around, how do we get better tooling around information on like as an example, we have an ERP system and we want to take something like Power BI and we want to get logical reporting and we want to be able to present that back to, to the C-level part of the organization. How do we modernize our applications so that we can start taking advantage of serverless architecture, as an example? It's those types of things. So there is a big drive for organizations to see how they can digitalize themselves or go on this journey to make sure they're still relevant in whatever industry they are in, or, obviously still monetizing what they have as their assets.
Absolutely exciting. And I think that there's so much opportunity. Just when you look at the continent that we're on at the moment, I think that, there's just massive opportunity that's going to take place still, especially when you look at the amount of money that's going to be spent on data centers going forward. The cloud is certainly here to stay. And I completely agree with you on that pace. I think it's going to even intensify even further in the years to come. Richard Vestav, the Cluster Executive at IOCO, thank you so much for joining us at this year's Cloud Conference. We really do appreciate your time.
Aki, thanks very much. Great to be with you.
Take care.